Hello and welcome to another episode of Chai Study Press's Chinese Australian History podcast. Today is number 20 and we're talking specifically about Chinese Australian history in New South Wales. And this is because it's based upon something I did for the Heritage Office in New South Wales many years ago now, in 1999, called Chinese Settlement in New South Wales, A Somatic History. Now, you notice how bots discuss Chinese history in New South Wales without the themes. They absorb all the themes together and present quite an interesting overview of the history of Chinese in New South Wales. Now, the significance of this is something that still hasn't been done, and I haven't done it yet, is a proper comparative of the history in different states. There's a lot more variation between what was going on in Queensland or down in Victoria, and certainly in Tasmania, up in the Northern Territory, and over in West Australia, than most histories allow for. And we haven't done a proper comparative to bring these things together. So I must admit that's partly my fault. I mean, I haven't done that yet, but I will do that either in these podcasts or in a later work that I'll start working on soon. So in the meantime, enjoy the discussion from our friendly bots, and I'll see you at the other end. Just look out for their rather odd pronunciation of Arnott. It should be Arnott's, of course, for Arnott's Biscuit, and the constant use of NSW for, of course, New South Wales, for those of you who are perhaps not familiar with this, the way the state of New South Wales is usually spoken about. Okay, so enjoy.
All right, settle in, because today we're taking a deep dive into a really fascinating and often misunderstood chapter of Australian history, Chinese settlement in New South Wales. When we think of this era, images of the gold rush often dominate our minds, but the story is so much richer, more complex, and deeply rooted in culture than many of us realize.
It absolutely is, and our primary source for this deep dive, Michael Williams' thematic history for the NSW Heritage Office, does an incredible job of challenging those easy stereotypes. Our mission today is really to go beyond the usual narratives, uncover the unique cultural foundations that drove this migration, and reveal the incredible resilience and highly organized nature of Chinese communities right here in NSW.
Yeah, we're going to trace a journey that spans nearly the entire history of NSW, really, from the early days right through to modern multiculturalism. And we want to show how Chinese people weren't just as sort of background players, but actually central to shaping the colony and later the state. You'll hear about everything from family ties that stretched across oceans to quiet acts of defiance against deeply discriminatory laws.
Oh.
So let's unpack this. So what immediately strikes you from our sources is that Chinese settlement in NSW wasn't a typical, small beginnings, gradual expansion kind of story.
No, not at all. Instead, it was much more dynamic, a roller coaster, really, of rapid growth and sharp declines.
Right, periods of intense interaction often mixed with equally intense discrimination.
Exactly. But at its heart, it was profoundly shaped by specific cultural practices that make it truly unique among migration stories.
And what's fascinating here is getting to the why behind this distinct migration pattern.
Most early Chinese migrants to NSW didn't just sort of arrive on a whim. They came predominantly from a handful of districts within the Pearl River Delta in South China.
Okay.
And in that region, there was already a tradition of men leaving their families for long periods to earn money overseas. This existed as far back as the 12th century, believe it or not.
Wow, the 12th century. So this wasn't just individual fortune-seeking triggered by, say, the gold rush.
Not solely, no. It was an ingrained cultural practice that simply found new avenues with the economic opportunities that arose later, like in Australia.
That's a crucial distinction. Given this, ancient tradition of men leaving home to earn money, I'm curious, how did this cultural context specifically shape the demographics of early Chinese migration here in NSW, especially concerning the role of women?
Well, it's directly tied to why early migration was overwhelmingly male. Men often came as family representatives, you see, entrusted with providing essential income back home.
Right.
A wife's primary role culturally was to support her husband's parents and manage the household, not necessarily to accompany him overseas.
So while economic pressures were definitely a factor,
Absolutely.
this wasn't just an economic decision, it was a deeply ingrained cultural one. It reinforced existing patterns rather than creating entirely new ones.
Precisely. And it wasn't a disorganized rush either. Our sources make it crystal clear that the migration was highly structured.
How so?
Through cooperative bands, labor agents, and relatives, what's often been called the credit ticket system.
Okay, the credit ticket system. So people arrived already owing money.
Yes, many arrived deeply indebted. And this debt significantly influenced their work habits. Things like living in dormitories, accepting board as part payment for work, and a willingness to take on various jobs.
Ah, and it's illuminating how these habits, which were often misunderstood and, frankly, despised by European workers, became pretexts for widespread prejudice against Chinese workers.
That's a powerful point about how context can completely reshape perception, isn't it? These seemingly undesirable work habits were actually a direct result of their economic reality and their cultural obligations.
Right.
And beyond that economic organization, that sense of identity ran even deeper. It extended right down to strong district and dialect identification.
So it wasn't a homogeneous Chinese community from the outset. It was more like a collection of distinct regional groups.
Exactly. People from the Pearl River Delta, for instance, largely spoke variations of the Yu dialect, which we often call Cantonese. But even within that, you had groups like the Hakka, or those from Longdu in the Zhongshan district, who had distinct dialects, often mutually unintelligible.
Really, so communication even between Chinese groups could be difficult.
Sometimes, yes. And this identity, based on their home district, was the bedrock for their social organization and their businesses here in NSW. It was a mosaic of specific regions.
That makes perfect sense. And this affinity for one's district led to what our sources call chain migration. So it's almost like a self-sustaining system, where success in one area opened doors for the next wave from that same area.
Precisely. The success of certain districts in establishing businesses and support networks meant they could sponsor and give credit to more of their own people. Over time, this actually led to a narrower representation of districts here in NSW because some became dominant. And these district-based societies and stores were absolutely crucial. They remitted money, they sent letters, they even arranged the return of deceased members' bones, but exclusively for their own members. It reinforced those profound ties back home.
So those profound ties didn't just facilitate their migration, they formed the very backbone of their lives once they arrived.
Absolutely.
How did these highly organized communities manage to build and sustain such strong connections here in NSW, often across vast distances and, let's face it, against significant odds?
Well, the Tongxian, or same-place societies, were absolutely central to this.
Tongxian societies.
Yeah, same place. These were benevolent institutions. They supported those in need. They were responsible for establishing temples, and a key role, which really illustrates the depth of cultural connection and the profound importance of filial piety, that deep respect for parents and ancestors, was ensuring the return of deceased members' bones to their ancestral villages.
Ah, yes, the bones.
For them, you see, true rest meant being laid to rest in their home soil.
That's such a powerful, almost heartbreaking detail, isn't it? Not just living here, but ensuring their final resting place was back home. Our sources tell us that between 1875 and 1930, an astounding 75% of Chinese burials in Rookwood Cemetery, Sydney, were eventually exhumed and sent back to China.
75%. It's incredible.
And this process was often facilitated by institutions like the Tunghua Hospital in Hong Kong, acting as a crucial intermediary. It really emphasizes the sort of temporary nature of their stay in many cases, and the strength of those family bonds.
And then you had merchant leaders like Wei Qi, who exemplified a kind of traditional paternalism within these communities.
Paternalism, how did that work?
Well, they weren't elected leaders in a democratic sense, but because of their business stature, their success, they were trusted implicitly. People would leave money with them for safekeeping. They'd even bail out community members arrested for gambling, for instance. It was seen as a deep obligation that came with their status within their specific district, a form of informal governance and social support.
Fascinating. And it wasn't just these district-specific groups, right? Larger Chinese organizations eventually emerged.
That's right. Reflecting perhaps a growing sense of a broader Chinese identity, especially in response to external pressures. One really influential example was the Chinese Masonic Society. It was instrumental in legal challenges, including a significant high court case in 1949 regarding wartime refugees.
And that society still exists.
It does. It's incredible to think that this organization, which started out as the Yi Hing Secret Society, still operates from its Sydney building today. It was formally established around 1912.
Wow. But underlying all this social structure was commerce, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Commerce was truly the lifeblood. Sydney became the hub of a sophisticated network of Chinese stores stretching right across NSW. And these weren't just shops selling goods, they were vital community centers.
Right. The heart of the community.
Exactly. They provided a lifeline for fellow district members, remitting money back home, arranging shipping tickets, and crucially, helping people navigate the incredibly complex bureaucracy of the Immigration Restriction Act. If you were a Chinese migrant back then, these stores were your essential service providers, your connection point, your link to everything.
You can almost picture the scene, can't you? Market gardeners on their one day off, maybe, congregating at stores like the Kwong War Chong in Dixon Street for an open table, sharing news, arranging those remittances, and the gifts they'd buy for their return trips to China. Our sources mention things like Arnott's biscuits, even an Ajax safe. It really paints a vivid picture of these transatlantic lives.
It does. It shows how Australian goods became part of their identity and their connection back home. It's a wonderful detail that ties it all together.
And the remittance system itself? You said it was sophisticated?
Incredibly sophisticated. Stores would collect individual payments from dozens of customers. They'd consolidate them into a single bank draft, send it off to a branch in Hong Kong.
Okay.
That Hong Kong branch would then convert the funds and arrange distribution, often by clerks literally delivering cash directly to the villages in China.
Wow, hand-delivered cash.
Yes. And the receipt, which often included space for a return letter, would eventually make its way back to Sydney and be displayed in the shop window for the original sender to collect.
That level of trust and organization, it almost makes modern banking look a bit clunky by comparison, doesn't it?
It really does. This whole system was a testament to their organizational prowess and the deep trust that existed within the community network.
But despite this deep community spirit and real commercial ingenuity, Chinese people in NSW faced immense legal and social discrimination. Immense. More than almost any other migrant group, really, with the obvious exception of Aboriginal people. They were subjected to specific restrictions that deeply impacted their lives.
Indeed. You had legislation like the 1861 Chinese Immigrant Regulation and Restriction Act in NSW. And then, crucially, the Federal Immigration Restriction Act of 1901, the cornerstone of what became known as the White Australia Policy. A whole set of laws designed specifically to restrict non-European immigration.
And these severely limited their entry and their rights once here.
Severely. Even domiciles, people who are already legally resident here, faced bureaucratic nightmares and arbitrary decisions when trying to travel to China and return. This was despite their legal rights being technically recognized.
So the stores became unofficial advisors almost.
Very often, yes. They were the de facto intermediaries, helping their communities navigate this complex and, frankly, often hostile system.
But people didn't just passively accept this, did they? There was defiance.
Absolutely. Merchants formed groups like the Chinese Merchants Defense League specifically to counter anti-Chinese agitation, often found in newspapers like the Sydney Morning Herald.
And when legal avenues were exhausted or just didn't work?
People found creative ways around the restrictions. Our sources note that official records, like poll tax receipts, show far fewer arrivals than other evidence suggests actually happened.
So how did they manage that?
Well, it was incredibly varied. There was land border smuggling, particularly from Queensland. After the 100-pound poll tax was imposed in NSW in 1888, that was a huge amount of money then.
100 pounds. Astronomical.
Exactly. And people stowed away on ships, hiding in coal bunkers, even water tanks. These methods were often facilitated by organized networks within the community. It highlights the sheer determination to overcome these barriers.
And then there was the infamous dictation test, a cornerstone of the White Australia Policy. Our sources mentioned it often left blank pages except for a signature. Can you explain how that worked as an exclusion tool?
It was a deliberately unfair tool. The test could be administered in any European language chosen by the immigration officer.
Any European language, not necessarily English.
Correct. So it was virtually impossible for most non-Europeans to pass, regardless of their actual English skills or fluency. It was designed to fail people.
A tool of exclusion, pure and simple.
Absolutely. And individuals caught without the proper papers faced jail or deportation. Community members would sometimes put up substantial surety. Our source mentions up to £1,000 in one recorded case to prevent this. Again, illustrating that deep communal support system.
And the discrimination wasn't just about immigration, was it?
No, far from it. You had discriminatory factory acts that specifically targeted Chinese workshops. Crown land laws prevented them from owning land in many cases. Even joining the army required European blood.
It sounds like a comprehensive system designed to marginalize them from almost every aspect of civic and economic life.
It really was. And labor issues were particularly charged. Chinese workers were often stereotyped as, submissive, willing to work for very little. This bred a lot of resentment.
But the sources challenge that stereotype.
They do. They reveal that the low wages often included board and lodging and were frequently part of a debt repayment system linked to the credit ticket migration we talked about.
Ah, so it wasn't just low pay for its own sake.
No. And as for conditions, the sources note that those workers who were free from debt were known to become, and this is a quote, careless of consequences and independent of custom. They'd even desert jobs for better opportunities elsewhere.
So demonstrating agency, not submissiveness, once they were free of those initial debts.
Exactly. It really recontextualizes the perception versus the reality, doesn't it?
It does. Now, the post-1901 era, with the White Australia policy in full swing, saw a narrowing of occupations available, right? Market gardening became dominant.
Yes, largely due to the collapse of the rural Chinese population outside the main centers and a general shift towards Sydney. Market gardening became a key niche. But then by the 1950s, even that started to decline because the population was aging and restrictive immigration meant few younger people could come in.
And this led to a surprising shift.
It did. The dramatic rise of Chinese cafes and restaurants right across NSW, in country towns as well as cities. This became the new avenue for Chinese-owned businesses to sponsor new migrants, often relatives, and keep those community links alive under the changed circumstances.
Fascinating adaptation. And while we're busting myths, let's talk about Chinese gold miners.
Right. The stereotypes there are persistent, too.
They weren't just working abandoned diggings, picking over scraps.
Not at all. They discovered entirely new gold fields. They worked both individually and in organized groups. Their intensive working methods, and particularly their well-built water races, were actually adopted by some European miners eventually.
And they were innovators, too.
Definitely. And the idea that they only dug shallow shafts or that they hid gold in the bones of the deceased, that's mostly folklore, or perhaps misinterpretations of practical realities.
Like what?
Well, maybe hiding small amounts from thieves or dealing with the severe customs duties of trying to take gold out of the country, but leaving large amounts in graves for years. Highly unlikely and impractical.
Right. Now, this stereotype of the unremittingly toiling Chinese settler, it often overlooks their leisure pursuits, doesn't it? What did they actually do to unwind? They couldn't have just worked all the time.
No, of course not. Tea drinking and chatting in tea shops or clubs, usually with people from the same district. That was very common. A social hub.
Okay.
There was Chinese opera. Acrobatic troupes toured the Victorian goldfields and likely came through NSW too. Our source even mentions a Chinese band in the mining town of Emmaville.
A band? What kind of music?
The source doesn't specify, unfortunately, but it shows organized leisure. And later in the 1930s and 40s, you see the Chinese Youth League sponsoring dances. Yeah, with music provided by the Chinese Masonic Society Orchestra, this signals changing demographics, as the gender imbalance slowly lessened and new Australian-born generations emerged.
But two activities, opium smoking and gambling, became really heavily linked to the Chinese image, didn't they?
Yeah.
Often used as pretexts for prejudice.
They absolutely were. Yet, it's crucial to remember both were indulged in by Europeans, too. And opium was perfectly legal and taxed, generating significant income for the NSW government until the early 20th century.
So a real double standard at play.
Absolutely. And the opium demon myth, this lurid image of Chinese men seducing young white girls into addiction, our source calls it a fallacy with no factual basis, yet it became a powerful tool of prejudice.
And gambling.
Similarly, the Royal Commission on Alleged Chinese Gambling in the 1890s ended up spending most of its time interviewing Chinese witnesses about the rules of games like Fantan and Pakapoo, rather than actually investigating the alleged police corruption it was set up for.
Which just highlights how easily prejudice could hijack public discourse and shift the focus away from the real issues, like corruption.
Precisely.
Ultimately, though, behind the policies and the stereotypes, these were human beings with complex lives, desires, and struggles.
Exactly.
What's really fascinating is how our sources constantly remind us that Chinese people were individuals, not some kind of monolith. The person section in the Williams history really drives this home, countering what one historian called the disembodiment of Chinese people in historical writing.
Absolutely. And you see these incredible individual stories. Families like the Hoon family, where an Australian-born son was taken back to China as an infant, raised in a village, and returned at 16 speaking no English at all. He then became a market gardener here.
Wow, imagine that transition.
Or the Chang family. They saw the land they'd painstakingly expanded using remittances sent back from NSW confiscated by the new communist government in China in 1949. Yet they kept an Arnott's biscuit tin, fashioned into a birdcage that had been brought back from NSW, a tangible link to their family's global journey.
An Arnott's biscuit birdcage.
Yeah.
Those details are so rich, aren't they?
They really are. Then there's the poignant story of Yat Kwan. He arrived on a temporary certificate in 1921, fought deportation orders for decades, literally decades. And he eventually became an Australian citizen in 1963. His file notes he was certified as a good sort who had assimilated because he lived in the suburbs and drank beer.
The criteria for assimilation. Quite something.
Isn't it? And we also hear about the lonely, those estimated 4 or 5% who simply disappeared from their villages back home, never married, never returned, just vanished from the records. These individual stories add such deep layers of humanity, revealing the full spectrum of experiences, success, struggle, loss.
And we must acknowledge, as our sources do, the biggest gap in our historical knowledge. The women. The immense gender imbalance caused by both those cultural norms we discussed and the discriminatory European laws profoundly limited choices for everyone.
It really did. It made intermarriage with non-Chinese women a complex, and the sources suggest often disagreeable option for many Chinese men.
Though it did happen.
Oh yes, it did happen. Census figures, like the 1911 one mentioned in our source, show nearly 500 Chinese men living with Australian-born wives. So it occurred more than some narratives might suggest, even against those significant social and legal odds. But their stories are often harder to find.
So what we've explored today truly highlights the unique and, I think, invaluable contribution of Chinese settlement to the heritage and the history of NSW. It's a story of deep cultural roots, incredible resilience, and systematic organization in often incredibly hostile circumstances. This wasn't just a side note in Australian history, was it?
Not at all. It was absolutely central to its development and its identity. And understanding this history, I think, helps us move past those simplistic stereotypes.
Yeah, like thrift and hard work.
Exactly. Those weren't just innate traits. They were often the direct results of contractual migration and the burden of debt.
And the lack of women wasn't some inscrutable mystery.
No, it was culturally shaped and legally enforced. By looking at these things from the perspective of their origins and their purpose, we gain far greater insight into the real lives of these migrants.
This deep dive also makes it really clear that the actions and choices of Chinese people in NSW weren't solely a reaction to European attitudes, right?
That's a key point. Their strong links to families and villages back in China, their distinct district-based identities, and their highly organized community structures meant they had agency. They had a vibrant inner life, largely independent of the prejudices they faced externally.
And this heritage isn't just historical dust, is it? It's tangible.
Very much so. You can still see it in the remnants of old temples, maybe joss houses. You hear it in the stories behind long-standing family businesses. You find it in the cemeteries, and of course in the many citizens of NSW today who have Chinese ancestry, both known and perhaps unknown. And the narrative continues to evolve, doesn't it? With new migrations happening now free of those past discriminations, adding fresh layers to this incredibly rich heritage.
So as you, our listeners, reflect on all this, maybe consider this provocative thought we picked up from the sources. They mentioned that much NSW heritage material, things like old store safes, account books, even those Arnott's biscuit bird cages, now actually resides in villages in southern China, sent or taken home by migrants over the generations.
Physical links.
Exactly. So what if the deepest dive isn't just into documents held here in Australia, but involves actually tracing those very physical connections back across the ocean, following the objects? What else might we discover about these deeply intertwined histories if we look there?
Good. I hope you enjoyed that discussion of the Chinese history in New South Wales. Many interesting points there. Some overlap with previous podcasts, of course, as you'd expect in these deep dives, as our bots call it, into the history of Chinese people in Australia. Now, as I said, this is based upon a thematic heritage study I did for the Heritage Office of New South Wales way back in 1999 called Chinese Settlement in New South Wales. That is, of course, available to download. If you look at the links here on the podcast, or go to my website on Chinese Australian History in 88 Objects. We'll still have those links various ways, or write to me at chidestudypress@gmail.com if you want further information or have trouble getting hold of any of the information that is available in these podcasts. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again at another podcast, number 21.